Hello everyone, what's up? Long time no see. I hope everybody had a great holiday. I was in California for the past 2 weeks celebrating Christmas with Jean-Luc's family. They live in Santa Barbara. We went to LA for a week, went to Santa Barbara for a week. It was amazing. It was warm, it was sunny. I kind of took off YouTube. I took off reading, which I'll talk about in a bit. And I feel really energized. I feel energized and focused. I am excited to be back today making this video. Today is December 31st. It is New Year's Eve. So I thought I'd do a little end of the year book tag for you. I'm hoping to post this today. Who knows if that'll happen. I posted this thing on my Instagram story that I saw on somebody else's Instagram story, as it were. And I just wanted to share this with everyone because I think New Year's often has a lot of pressure attached to it. Hello. Would you need something? Oh, I love you. Anyway, yeah, I often feel like New Year's has a lot of pressure attached to it, and I do have some New Year's resolutions, which I might make another video for, I'm not sure. I really liked this message. So it says, remember that even though it's the end of the year, it's also winter, which means that in nature, everything slows down. Unlike hustle culture that tells you to speed up to start planning your New Year goals and push through the holiday stress, winter reminds us that the closing of the year is actually time to go within, to slow down, and to rest. So if you're feeling an urge to hibernate, a yearn to do less, a longing for slowness, know that your body is reminding you of the rhythm of the current season. And that's a beautiful thing. If nature is designed to slow down during this time, so are we. So I think it's great to have, New Year's resolutions and stuff, but I think it's also just good to acknowledge that, it's okay to chill out in January and rest. Yes, we have this end of the year book tag, which is so fun. I think I got it from Sarah Caroli, Queen Sarah Caroli. I'm sure a lot of other people are using it. I'm not sure where it originated, but it certainly did not originate here. So no credit taken. I want to first just do a little Goodreads reflection. So last year in 2023, I read 68 books or something like that. My goal was to read 52 books, a book a week, and I surpassed that goal. And then towards the end of 2023, I was getting more kind of into my reading momentum. I was reading 10, 11 books a month, and I was like, okay, 2024, I'm going to up my goal to 75. And I was just so surpassing my goals every month that I, in the middle of the year, upped it to 100, because I never want reading to be about hitting a goal. I want it to be about enjoying what I'm reading. But I do think it is good to have goals, so it's just kind of finding that balance. So I did up it to 100, and I did meet that goal, and I read 102 books this year. I took 2 kind of reading breaks this year, which to me were so important. I think if you're reading 3 or 4 books a week, which is sometimes what I was doing, you do kind of have to take a break, reset. I know I want to read The Artist Way and do The Artist Way this year, and Jean-Luc is doing it now. One of the things he said that it encourages people to do is to stop intaking information. So that means reading, watching TV, watching the news, etc. for I think 2 weeks. And I do think as an artist, and just as a person too, but specifically as an artist, I do think it was important to release myself from other people's stories and experiences and just kind of live in my own reality for a bit. So I took a reading break kind of over the summer, I would say July and August, mainly because I was producing a film that I wrote and acting in it called Microfocusing. Working title, that might change. It was just too much. I wanted to be in character. I wanted to kind of study that script. And so I read a bit during the summer, but I definitely took off pressure. I think I read in 3 months 12 books or something, which is not a lot for me. And then these past 2 weeks, I really didn't read anything either. That, to me, it was very beneficial. I think anything is good in moderation. I think it's always good to take breaks and just kind of clear the cache, kind of, so to speak. So I'm really happy I did that. I'm ready tomorrow to start reading again. I started The Christmas Tree Farm by Laurie Gilmore, and even though it's January, I do want to read that. So that's probably the first book I'll start out with. But I wanted to review the challenge. So I read 102 books this year. So I think that averages about 2 books a week, which tracks for me. Again, there were some weeks I was reading a book a day. There were some weeks I was reading 2 books a week. So, and then there were some weeks I wasn't reading at all. So that kind of tracks for me. I know I also had a goal last year of reading more nonfiction and more literary fiction, and I definitely feel like I did that. I feel like every month I read lit fic and nonfiction, whether it was one lit fic book or one nonfiction book. I definitely incorporated that into my reading, which I'm really happy about. I didn't want to have another year that was just like all fantasy and romance, which the previous year wasn't, but it was a lot of that. And I just kind of wanted to make sure I was reading stuff that was also making me think more and like expanding a different type of knowledge, if that makes sense. I read 102 books, 40,371 pages. The shortest and longest books is part of the book tag, so I'll get to that later. My average book length in 2024 was 395 pages, which makes sense. I read a lot of like longer books, but I also read a lot of like romances and a lot of books that were about 400 pages, so that tracks. My most shelf book that I read was Educated by Tara Westover, which about 3 million people shelved. And my least shelf book was Share the Memoir, which about 2,500 people shelved. Like, guys, you have to, like... You've got to make some changes. You've got to read the Share Memoir. It's amazing. My average rating for 2024 was 3.9. I guess that makes sense. Because they don't have half-star ratings, if I gave someone a 3.5 rating, I would give them a 4 in Goodreads just to round up, just because I really respect what writers do and the process that goes into it. And I know that like Goodreads, especially with authors that like aren't as well known, like I know Goodreads really helps them do what they want to do. So I always kind of like boost the rating and round up if it's a half star. So it was probably closer to a 3.5 really, but on Goodreads it's 3.9. The highest rated book on Goodreads that I read was The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. It's like one of the most highly rated books on Goodreads. That makes sense. I also gave it 5 stars. And then my first review of the year, I kind of like don't give a lot of reviews, but what it was for Daisy Hates, the second book of the Magnolia Park series. And I said, obsessed, Daisy's top 3 favorite characters of all time. And I think that still holds up, I think. Maybe. Definitely top 5. Then my last review of the year was Winter in Paradise, and I just said 3.5 exclamation point, even though I give it 4 stars. Let's get to the actual book tag portion of the video now. A book I wish I could erase from my memory and read again, Keeping 13. The Boys of Tommen series I read kind of in the latter half of this year. I've been reading like a book a month just because I want to like savor it and not read it all in a row. The first 2 books are like from 2 characters' perspectives, and then the second 2 books kind of take place in around the same time frame and are from Shannon, the character in the first book. The first 2 books, her brother Joey, him and his like woman's perspective. I guess she's a girl at that point. She grows into a woman as the story continues. So Keeping 13 is the second book in that series. There are things that happen in that book that also happen in the third and fourth book, but you experience them for the first time, obviously, in the second book. And I was just so like shocked at a lot of the stuff that happened, and it was just such an emotional ride. I remember being on the subway crying when I read parts of this book, and it was just like one of those books that totally like swept me away and like put me somewhere else. So even though it was a hard book to read at a lot of points, it was just, I was so in it that if I could erase my memory and read it again, I totally would. My favorite new character, it has to go to Jude from A Little Life. Like, it just has to. I've never wanted to reach out and hug someone more than Jude. I mean, A Little Life is one of the most harrowing books to read. It is like an ugly, ugly cry book. Multiple times, multiple days, you will be crying. It's so much. But Jude. And also, like, honorable mention to Harold and Willem. So most surprising books, good and bad. I was so pleasantly surprised by The Comeback by Ella Berman. I've talked about this book so much on my channel, but I had it on my shelf for like 2 years before I read it. It's about this young woman who is an actor, and at like the height of her career, she just like kind of ghosts LA and like goes to live with her parents in Anaheim for a year, and then decides, okay, like the book kind of opens when she decides she's going to go back to LA, kind of reconnect with relationships she ghosted, and kind of come to terms with her past and move forward with her future. It was a very satisfying book. I love books, as I say often, about like the dark side of show business, the dark side of LA. Like, I love all of that. So it was just like the setting was perfect. The circumstances were great. And then just the arc of the book. I love character-driven books as well. This is pretty character-driven, but some fun plot points. And it had a really good payoff at the end, I thought. So I'll give it 5 stars. I was so excited to read it. Bad? Assistant to the Villain. I know a lot of you guys really love this book, and I'm so happy for you. But this book was just so, like, it was like so predictable, so like I just didn't connect. Like, I was like, I know exactly what's gonna happen, I don't care when is this going to be over? I probably should have DNF'd it, but I didn't. So I'm sorry. I feel like that's really harsh, but I really did not like this book and I will not be continuing the series. Best and most disappointing new release. The best new release was Share the Memoir, period, full stop, end of sentence. Share is everything. I actually, when I was in California, drove past her house, not on purpose, like we were driving to Santa Barbara from LA and we drove down the Pacific Coast Highway, which she lives off of, and you couldn't really like see the full house, but I definitely saw a glimpse of it and I was just like blown away. I think Cher is just the most amazing entertainer. She comes from nothing, like she had a very hard childhood, and I love the grit that she brings to all of her work. I don't know, if you like memoirs or if you have any interest in Cher or just like show business or anything, like I just think this is so great. And I also listened to it because she narrates it. The most disappointing new release, I'm so sorry, it was Reckless, the sequel to Powerless. I really like Powerless. I think I gave it like a 4.5, and I like Powerful, the little novella. But then Reckless, I was just like, again, I don't know if it's because, and this could have been like the assistant to the villain thing too, like I just feel like I've read a lot of fantasy books at this point, and there are like tropes that happen a lot. It just kind of like gets a little boring. I also think that Reckless felt like such a like transitional book. Like it almost felt like Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1. Like it was just like, okay, we're starting at the end of this last book, and I feel like we're ending at the beginning of the next book. But like what happened in this book, it was just like we just transitioned there. Like there wasn't a lot that actually happened, in my opinion. I don't know if that makes any sense, but this book just, I was like, it's kind of bored with it. I also read it during like my summer sort of like slump. So take that with a grain of salt, but I just was not, I was kind of disappointed. I was hoping for I was hoping for more. The longest and shortest book I read. According to Goodreads, the longest book I read was Redeeming 6, which is apparently 1,066 pages. I've been very confused with the Boys of Tommen series because like the Kindle versions say that they're a lot longer than the regular versions, and the regular versions have like part 1 and part 2 of books, but you can like buy them together. Like I'm so lost when it comes to the series. So I guess it's Redeeming 6. When I was looking myself, I had The House of Flame and Shadow, which is 848 pages, but I guess we'll just go with Goodreads, which is 1,066 pages for Redeeming 6. And the shortest book I read was a play. It was Venus and Fur, which is 84 pages. As I mentioned, the most emotional book was by far Little Life. Yeah, I don't think you could possibly find or read or write or discover another book that is more emotional than Little Life. Would not recommend reading this in the winter. It's just too much depression. Happiest book? This is a weird one. Happy books, I feel like, are more romance, rom-com kind of books that are like fluffy. But I think even within those books, like you get some sadness. I don't know. I had trouble kind of like figuring this out. So I just settled with The Match by Sarah Adams. I remember reading that book and just feeling very, very warm. It's about this woman who is epileptic and she comes from a lot of money, but she like kind of has forfeited her trust fund or her fortune and gone against her family's wishes, and she's working for a nonprofit that pairs service dogs with epileptic people. And so this little girl comes along to be matched with a service dog, and her like hot dad comes with her, and he's single, and you can guess what happens. It was just a very warm book, and the ending's cute. The best series has to be Boys of Tommen. I read a few series this year, like I read Crescent City, which I did love. Definitely my least favorite of the Sarah J. Maas series. And I also read Magnolia Parks, which I really, really loved, but I have to say, I do think Boys of Tommen takes the cake. I still have to read Taming Seven, but the character-driven nature of these books, the characters in these books, the supporting characters in these books, everything is just so beautiful. Like, I love it so much. It reminds me of Magnolia Parks a little bit in the way that it's written. They both do deal with like dark themes, even though Magnolia Parks kind of takes place in this like British high society setting, whereas like Boys of Tommen takes place in like working class Cork, Ireland vibes. There are also like class issues within that, and you get like a variety of class. It just like it was just a little grittier for me, and I love grit. Boys of Tommen it is for me. These characters are so much more, like, off the bat lovable than the Magnolia Parks characters. You kind of have to learn, like, you kind of hate them at first and you have to learn to love them, which is also, like, an awesome experience as a reader. I don't know, there's just something about the Boys of Tommen series that's, like, so warm. I don't even know if I'm saying that right, but it's just so warm and adorable. Moving on. Prettiest cover. I went with, which I don't actually own this version, but the Magnolia Parks Into the Dark. I don't know if it's the collector's edition, original cover collection. Oh, so it's like, okay, so the first 4 books came out and they had a different cover. And then before the 5th book came out, there was like a rebranding done where it was like just like legs and shoes on various covers. So I have all the legs and shoes, but they also came out with an original version of the 5th book in the theme of the original covers of the first 4. And I just think that one is so beautiful. Like, I love the symbolism. I love her. She's stunning. It totally takes the cake. It is art. Favorite new author? I am going to say Dolly Alderton. I read 2 books by her this year. I definitely want to read more. I read Good Material and Everything I Know About Love. And I really love her humor. I love the way she writes. I love her style. I just think she's so clever. And I definitely want to read more by her. It goes by, like, it's easy to read, but it's also very quick. It's witty. You know, there are books that are just as easy to read that, like, are kind of, like, lower IQ. Like, I feel like Dolly Alderton is more of a high IQ, easy read, if that makes sense. And she's very witty. Like I said, I love her sense of humor. If you haven't read anything by her, I definitely recommend it. Books I finally read. So I'm going to go with The Nightingale, which is a Chris and Hannah book that was published, and I believe in like 2016. It is historical fiction about the German occupation of France in World War II, and it kind of examines these 2 sisters who lived in France and how they both survived this time period and, you know, the complications of having to live through something like that and how kind of morally gray things got. It was so good. It was so good. If you haven't read it, I would definitely read it. Another book I finally read is The Secret History. That has been on my list for a very long time. It had been on my shelf for a very long time. I just feel like these 2 books are like books that everybody talks about, and they're a little bit longer, which is why I've been putting them off. Also, A Little Life is kind of in that category of like just these kind of like books that are kind of becoming classics, I would say, that are emotional in some places and take something out of you to read, so that's why I'd been putting them off, but I did finally read them, so woo! Definitely recommend all 3 of them, and I don't recommend reading all 3 of them in the same month. I read Nightingale and Secret History in the same month. That kind of was a lot. Books I'm glad I got off my TBR. I had this book, Wish You Were Here. I got this book, I probably had it for like 2 years on my TBR, physical copy. I had been putting it off because it's kind of like, it centers around COVID. It opens in March of 2020, and I think I like bought it and then I was like, oh, I'm like actually not really ready to read this mentally and emotionally, and then I was like, let's just do it. It did not go where I thought it was gonna go. It was very interesting, the kind of twist in it. I would recommend. I'm glad I finally read it. Like, I was not mad about reading it. I also read We Are the Light, which is another book that had been on my TBR, my physical TBR, for a while. It was a book of the month book from like 2 years prior, from like November 2022, and I read it in November of 2024. This one was so well written. Like, objectively speaking, it was so well written. I could have gone my life without reading it, but I'm happy that it's no longer on my TBR because it's been there for a while, and no offense, but it's not like, I don't love the cover. It's not the most aesthetic book, so I'm just happy that I read it. It's done. I also am happy that I read it because I like reading books that I don't see out a lot in like other YouTube channels or like on display in bookstores and stuff. It's nice to kind of be able to provide you with some insight on other books that people don't talk about as much. But this one just, I didn't need to read it. I didn't need to read it. Okay, a book that should be made into a TV show or movie. So I picked 2. I think the Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy, which I read this year in fall of 2024. But I just think it's such a like fast-moving, kind of fun romantasy, and those always make good TV shows. I also would love to see The Guest by Emma Cline made into just like a classic A24 indie film. It would have been cool to have like Dakota Johnson play that character, but she's definitely too old for it now. I'll do it. I look like a librarian right now. Is that okay? Anyway, yeah, I would love to see The Guest made into like a nice character-driven indie film. cast me. Which book is your happy place book? I didn't really have one of these this year. I wanted to reread A Court of Thorns and Roses, which is definitely a happy place book for me, specifically the 5th book in the series, but I didn't read that this year. So I settled on Ready or Not, which is kind of a rom-com that I read in the middle of the year, maybe like April or May actually. And it's about like an unexpected pregnancy. And at first when I read what the book was about, I was like, oh no, I don't like, that's stressful. I don't want to read about that. But like, oh my gosh, the characters, I loved them so much. Every single character and all of their complexities and their relationships, everything was so beautiful. They were all just trying their best. And I really, really loved this book so much. I'm very excited for Cara Baston, or Bastoni, or something like that. The author of Ready or Not has a new book coming out next year, 2025, and I am very excited to read it because I loved Ready or Not. The best book adaptation of the year, I mean, Wicked, duh. Even though, like, that was an adaptation of the musical, which was an adaptation of the book, I do think that the film took more pieces from the book than I remember seeing in the musical. I did not like the book. I am a long-standing fan of the musical. I've been a fan of the musical for 21 years. The person that, I forget what her name is, but the person that wrote the book for the musical just really took the elements that Gregory Maguire gave us, which were great elements, and crafted it more into the story about female friendship. The qualities of the politics and stuff were kind of there, but we went further with it, and it was more concise and like crisp the way that the musical did it. And then obviously the movie is very close to the musical, just kind of went more in depth. And I swear, like, I experienced this story and these songs, which, I mean, I've known like the back of my hand literally almost my whole life, completely anew when I saw this movie for the first time. Like, I was shocked. The story hit in like a deeper way because you were so close to it, and it just went deeper, and it was, oh my god, it was so good. Okay. An unpopular book I loved, and vice versa. An unpopular book I loved, I went with The Comeback. I don't know if I meant like unpopular, like people don't like it, or just unpopular, like people don't know about it, but I went with people don't know about it for this specific one. Yeah, The Comeback. I don't feel like a lot of people know about this book, and as I said before, I loved this book so much. And then I guess a popular book that I didn't love, I did not love the Cruel Prince trilogy. I feel like once you start reading specifically YA fantasy, YA romantasy, it becomes a little like, oh, all of these books are kind of the same. So I don't know if I just need to like space out my fantasy a little bit more, but by the time I got to the Cruel Prince, I was just like, I don't need this. I haven't read the third book yet. I want to read it just because I want to finish the trilogy. That would feel nice. But I don't even like remember what happened in the second book. Barely remember what happened in the first book. So I don't know. We'll see. Lowest and highest rated on Goodreads. The lowest rated book that I read this year on Goodreads was The Guest by Emma Cline. I guess I get character-driven books are not for everyone, but they are definitely for me. And I love this book. I thought it was so clever. Definitely like an unreliable narrator trope, whereby the narrator was kind of like convincing herself in a way, or like not seeing that she like wasn't just an absolute person. But you read it and you almost are there with her. But then you're like, oh no, that's really delusional, you know? And I love books like that. I love when like you kind of get that with The Secret History a bit too, where like the main character is just really living in their own reality, and kind of like you become part of that, and then you're like, oh wait, that's crazy. What are you doing? So I really loved it. I was surprised to see that. And then the highest rated book on Goodreads that I read this year was The Nightingale. My favorite audiobook was Keeping 13. I've done like combo of audiobook and physical reading for the Boys of Tommen series, and those audiobook actors and like having the authentic like Irish accent while you're listening to it is just so important, because you kind of like pick up, I don't know, like cultural bits that I just wouldn't get reading it to myself. I really, really loved those audiobooks, and then Keeping 13 was just my favorite because it was for me, like the most emotional. A new annual reread. I didn't reread any books this year. I really wanted to read the A Court of Thorns and Roses series, as I mentioned, but I didn't. So I do think I want to reread maybe in February. It's time. It's been like a year and a half. That's crazy. Oh my god. My new comfort book. I love Wild Eyes by Elsie Silver. This was the second book in the Rose Hill series. But yeah, Wild Eyes was amazing. I liked it a lot more than the first book. Definitely check out both though. Like, they were great little rom-coms. But Wild Eyes just hit a lot differently. And I love the children in that book. I know a lot of people like have an aversion to children in books. I don't have that problem, but if you do, I hear that people that do still really love the children in this book. So give it a try. That's it. That's the end of the year book tag for 2024. I think I'm liking where this channel is going. I think this year I really committed to BookTube as like the main source of content. This year I got monetized too, which was awesome. So I'm really enjoying where the channel's going. And, you know, if you have anything that you want to see more of, I would love to do more reading vlogs. The thing is, like, working like 9-hour work days and also doing a reading vlog, it can be a little challenging. So you'll definitely start getting more reading vlogs once I start making more money on YouTube. But until then, it's kind of going to be like a one reading vlog a month type thing. I enjoy making them a lot and I enjoy watching them a lot. So I'll try to make more of them in the future this year. I don't know. Like I said, I still have to think about it. I'm getting ahead of myself. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know if there's any books that you loved, you hated this year, any new authors you love, any new characters you love. Just comment down below. I love talking about that stuff with you guys. I hope you have a wonderful new year. Happy New Year. Happy 2025. Let's take it easy. Let's not put too much pressure on ourselves. Let's take a deep breath, do some yoga, do some meditating, do some journaling, do some like watching TV, staring at the wall, reading, but like whatever you want to do. Just relax. Just relax. I'll see you guys in the next one.